I hope you can hear me. Maybe somebody can put his thumb up. Yeah, I can see I'm being heard. Okay, yeah. I will do the welcoming remarks. My name is Gerrit Straaf, and I am the Botswana County Representative for the USA Trade Hub. Yeah, this webinar, it's really about the toolkit, which is a step-to-step guide for companies to see how they can actually access the South African market. And yeah, for us, a toolkit, it is as good as it is being used by companies to actually export. So we hope that you're going to get enough information to be able to help you go further. And also that it can help you in actually exporting your products into South Africa. And yeah, along the way, there will be time for questions and answers. Just a couple of house rules. First of all, please, everybody, if you can switch off, I see that. If we can switch off our microphones off if you are not talking. Like I said, we don't want the event to be interfered with background noises. If you do pose a question, you can either put it in the chat box or you can raise your hand. And then when you are asked to pose your question, you can switch on your mic and also your video if your network is strong enough. So the house rule: microphone off if you are not talking. Also video off if you are not talking, because it takes the wavelength. And if you pose questions, put them in the chat box or raise your hand. So that is in short how we're going to operate this event. Like I mentioned, making use of this toolkit is what it is all about. And what I am going to do, I'm going to introduce Mr. George Makore, the Deputy Chief of Party of the USA Trade Hub. And also, yeah, Deputy Chief of Party, this is the terminology of USAID programs. So don't think it's just one big party here, but Deputy Chief of Party is basically the Deputy Chief Operating Officer. So George, he is also a technical specialist in terms of AGOA issues. He has a lot of experience in terms of export competitiveness. He always says Botswana is his second country. So he's been staying in Botswana. He's got plenty of friends here. So I will ask him to give an overview of the USA Trade Hub objectives. Thanks, George. Please go ahead.
Thanks very much, Gerrit, one of my friends in Botswana. Thanks very much for the introduction. Yes, I have. I consider Botswana to be my second home, and I can see a number of familiar names there. Thank you all for attending this webinar. As Gerrit pointed out, the objective really is for us to be familiar with the cross-border toolkit that was developed as in response to a lot of you's request to us to assist in getting you to know more about how you can actually navigate exports or the export field between Botswana and South Africa. As again Gerrit pointed out, we USAID Southern Africa Trade and Investment Hub, for those that do not know, and it's a long name, so we prefer going by the shorter version, which is USAID Trade Hub. It's a project. We are a project funded by USAID, and the project has been in existence since October 2016. We are a 6-year project, and because we're a project, we have a lifespan. And come about this time next year, the project will be coming to an end. And one reason why we've come up with tools such as this one we're going to be discussing today is mainly to ensure that when we are no longer there, you will then be able to have tools that you can go to help you continue with exports without our assistance. So, is the USAID Southern Africa Trade and Investment Hub project, what is it that we do? We work in 9 countries out of the 16 SADC countries, and Botswana is one of the countries. In fact, for those that know the history of the USAID trade hubs, the projects, the previous project used to be housed and or used to operate from Gaborone in Botswana. We are now based in Pretoria. We have 3 main objectives, what we call our mandate. These objectives are really aimed at getting you as exporters to be able to do the business of exports and trade. So the first one is really linked to why we are here today, which is looking at how we can increase exports or help you to increase exports from Botswana to South Africa. So our role here is really to identify all the aspects that can actually then be worked on to help you to increase exports from where you are to South Africa. So the first thing is identifying who has the potential and interest to export and what products you would want to export to South Africa. And then we also on this side in South Africa, we help to identify potential buyers who would be looking for the products that you would like to export. And we then assist in terms of linking you up as exporters with the buyers. In addition to that, we also look at what other areas would make you to be able to do the business in terms of exports. In this case, the 2 that we are going to be discussing today is one way of us assisting you to actually do that. In addition, we also assist with facilitating or being able to remove any barriers that might be there, particularly the ones that will prevent you from entering the South African market. In most cases, you would find one of the main issues that I highlighted to do with facilitation with certification, making your products certified so that they can be accepted on the market. The thinking behind this is that, of course, South Africa is a big market. There's a lot of demand. And in addition to that demand, there is also demand for products, for finished products. There's also demand for raw materials that can be further processed into products for export to other parts of the world, including the US. The second objective or second mandate that we have is in response to calls by most of or many exporters in terms of getting them to have access to funding that can help you to either scale up your production or meet some of the demands that you would want to be able to export. We identify potential investors, those that would want to increase their footprint. Please, can you kindly mute so that we can hear each other? Thank you. So the second objective is really to identify would be investors who are willing to invest in Botswana or in companies in Botswana. And then we also look at who will be looking for funding, and we link up the would-be investee with the would-be investor so that we can actually discuss and finalize how best you can do business. So that's the second objective, mainly to assist you with funding. The third objective, which is one of those objectives that are actually also linked to the first objective, that is assisting in how best you as exporters can take advantage of the African Growth and Opportunity Act opportunities that are offered by that act, so that you can then be able to export products to the US under that program, which is mainly aimed at facilitating more exports to the US when you export products that are AGOA eligible. AGOA program allows you to export over 6,400 product lines without paying duty to the US. And that's what the AGOA program allows you to do. So those are the three objectives that we have, and those are that is our mandate. We do have other areas that are not really linked to Botswana, and I'm not going to go in to discuss that. Having outlined what it is that we do as a project, I would like to quickly allow us to go into the business of the day, why we are here today. And we do have an interesting program with a number of presentations, particularly the main presentation on the toolkit that we have developed. And I would like to take this opportunity to wish you all very productive discussions. Please ask your questions. Make sure that you get to understand what this toolkit is all about. We are also working on developing this toolkit into short videos that can actually help you to understand better this toolkit. With those words, I would like to hand over back to Harriet to take us through to the next part of the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you so much, George. We are keeping well into time. What I will do next is basically to hand over to our partner. And I think, like George said, USA Trade Hub is a program which is coming to an end. And we are working as much as possible with partners where we can anchor some of our products and our workflows. In this case, we have been working closely with BEMA, Botswana Exporters and Manufacturers Association. And in that regard, I have the pleasure actually to hand over to Mantla Sankoloba. She's the CEO. Not the chief of party, but the CEO. And yeah, so she has a track record in terms of human resources development, and she's also an experienced professional in terms of leadership and business practices. I'm going to hand over to her, and she will take us through the agenda and then the program going forward. Once again, before I hand over, I think the toolkit really is there for us to see how we can export and try to reduce what we say paying learning money when you export. You always pay learning money, but if you can use the toolkit and avoid some of the pitfalls, it can actually help you a lot. With that, I would like to hand over to Mantla. Mantla, please go ahead.
And thank you, Harriet. Okay, I'm trying to switch on the camera. Okay, thank you so much for for this afternoon and the very insightful upcoming presentation that we are going to enjoy. Like Carrot has introduced me, my name is Mantla Sankoloba, the CEO of Botswana Exporters and Manufacturers Association, and I will be the moderator of this session today. First of all, let me take you through to what BEMA is. BEMA is a business membership organization that was formed in 1995 with at least over 300 companies which are members who are into manufacturing and exporting. And its main mandate is advocacy on the ease of doing business, and of course to solicit for markets on behalf of the members, as well as information that is usable to themselves. That is why we are in partnership with the likes of USA Trade Hub to ensure that this kind of information the exporters so need, it reaches them timely, and then they can utilize it to be able to expand their territories to markets such as of the USA as well as South Africa. So BEMA's role in the American market and South African market, we do sit as the co-chairs in the GOA reference group locally or at the national level, where we of course represent the sector to ensure that their interests and their chances of them being able to export to the American market as well as South Africa are increased. And therefore, we do have a number of programs, of course, that we do run with the USA Trade Hub, where we ensure that companies are capacitated in terms of allowing them to be able to export to the American market and the South African market. So we currently have two running programs that we have with the USA Trade Hub, which of course looking into the technical support, as well as ensuring that the products they are at a level of quality that is required. They actually fulfill the requirements of the two markets that I've mentioned. That is why we are timely enjoying this particular program, of course, which will ensure that companies have access to information that they can use to prepare themselves or to ready themselves to export to the American market and the South African market. And without any further ado, let us look at the today's agenda. Please let's share the agenda so that we see how far we are and where we are going, and also familiarize ourselves with our upcoming speakers. Okay. According to our agenda now, we are going to have our speaker, Mary Ganda. She is going to give us the short-term. She's going to give us the presentation on the main subject itself, the cross-border trade toolkit, and we are also going to have at between 10 to 3 and 10 past 3, we are going to have the questions where we are going to have our participants engaging at that level. And then we are going to have Mary again coming on to give us the cross-border trade toolkit, Incoterms and certifications. And then we are going to have the follow-up questions and answers. And then we are going to finally have the closing remarks by Francis Fraser, the portfolio manager of Botswana, Namibia, and Malawi USA Trade Hub. So going back again to the house rules, please do mute your mic when you are not speaking, and do raise your hand when you have a question so that we can engage with yourself. And also when you answer the question, you may switch on your when you ask the question, you may switch on your video. When you are not on the platform, please do not switch on your video so that we can allow the presenter the platform so that we can enjoy the platform of the presenter. And also you are encouraged to utilize the chat box. Please, if you do have any questions or any comment, please use the chat box so that we can engage more there. And you are so encouraged to participate actively so that we can enjoy this session. And also, if you do have any comments, please, you are highly welcome, very much welcome to share your thoughts and your comments with us through the chat box. So without any further ado, I'm going to now introduce our first speaker of the day, Miss Mary Gander. Miss Mary Gander is short-term consultant with the Trade Hub since last year, December. She is very much experienced with 18 years of work experience in her current role as an independent consultant. She works with development agencies and companies to provide logistics, trade, process improvement, and value chain solutions to increase trade. And I'm sure that many of us here would be very familiar with Mary because she has done a very intensive effort to consult with us when she was coming up with the tool so that she can also incorporate our thoughts and our suggestions as to what exactly we would want to see in this particular tool. So I will hand over now to Mary to take us through to the presentation, which I trust will enjoy. Mary, I hand over to you. Please take over.
Thank you so much, Mantha, and thank you, Gerrit. I'm really excited to be speaking to you, the attendees today, and I'm so happy that there's so many of you here attending to learn more about the toolkit and the different processes that you need to follow for exports. I'd like to share my slides right now. So I'm switching off my camera so I can just share my slides with you. Okay, so in December last year, we started consulting with different companies in about 7 or 8 surrounding countries within the SADC region to find out more about your requirements. And obviously with meetings with the USA Trade Hub prior to this, a lot of the stakeholders mentioned, you need skills, you need to know the processes for exporting. Some of you have tried exporting and come up with a lot of challenges. So that's where this toolkit came from, really, and it's from dealing with the stakeholders that the USA Trade Hub has decided to develop this toolkit. The presentation outline for today, I'll just go through a quick country profile for Botswana and the commodities that we are focusing on, export readiness, export registrations, the export process, import process, commodity specific requirements, the documentation that you require, Incoterms and contracts, payment methods, and the next steps. Please remember that the presentation will be shared with you after the webinar. Okay, so for the USA Trade Hub product list, this was taken from the meetings with the stakeholders, and they looked at who wanted to export, the type of commodities that we needed to find information on, and that's what we actually worked on for the toolkit. So here we have a list of the products that we actually focused on for the toolkit. And I've met with some of the businesses in Botswana, online, on Zoom meetings and so on, just to find out more about the processes and the challenges that we're faced. So some of the products that we have covered are macadamia nuts, fish, sesame seeds, coffee, honey, different types of sauces, meat and meat products, PPE. And what we will go through later on is the requirements for these commodities to be exported to South Africa. And one of the complaints was, the expectations for South African importers are very high. and the standards are quite high. So we looked at what was required from the sense of working with the Department of Agriculture, what kind of permits, what processes need to be followed in Botswana, and we tried to put together as much information as possible. So, when you start exporting and when you're looking into exporting, you have as much information as possible. Just the main aim was that to actually reduce your costs and delays that people were faced. Because once you come to the border and your goods are stopped, you end up with fines, you end up with storage costs, your extra transport costs, and so on. So the main idea behind the toolkit was to actually help you, start with a smooth process as much as possible with your exporting. The top 5 export destinations for goods from Botswana in 2019, where goods were mainly going to the United Arab Emirates, Belgium, India, South Africa, and China. In 2020, the main exports to South Africa comprised of mineral products, precious metals, prepared foodstuff, machinery, and vegetables. The products that are covered in the regional cross-border trade toolkit are meat and meat products, textiles and apparel, salt, handicrafts and accessories, cosmetics, and personal protective equipment, PPE, and that was because of COVID, and PPE became a big exporting commodity for a lot of countries because of COVID. So to start out with your export process, if you haven't exported before, the main thing to look at is where your business is really. And from seeing the pre-registration list, I see some businesses are not registered, some are registered, and some of you do have export experience, which is great. For those who haven't exported before, you really need to look at your business and your commitment to exporting, because it is a huge challenge and it is costly. So there are a few things that you need to look at within your business and within your product to actually, ascertain whether or not you are ready. And if you are not ready, to look at how you can actually become ready, looking at the different types of skills that you need. So firstly, yes, it's commitment. How committed are you to actually going the long haul? Because you may decide today that you want to export, but to actually export, it might take, 6 to 12 months or 18 months until you actually find your first buyer. Do you have the management that have the skills for exporting? And if you don't, that's not a huge challenge, because you can always, get them trained, or you can find management who have experience with exporting. Financial resources are a big aspect to think about and to prepare for, because when you are exporting, you need a lot more money than you would with your domestic market. You actually need to spend money with looking for customers in other countries, whether it's attending trade shows. As much as there is funding available, you will still need to put in your own money to do that, to do market research. It costs a lot of time and money. And then when you actually do get an export order, you will need to spend money on producing that order, and the payment for that order may not come immediately. If you're not getting the payment in advance, you may need to wait a couple of months actually for that actual payment. So you need to have the finances to actually keep you going for the next few months until you get that payment. You also need technical expertise, and this is on exporting, international trade. And so if you do not have the technical expertise for that, that is fine, because you have these clearing and forwarding agents who can help you. You've got transporters who can help you, and a lot of these tasks you can outsource to other companies. Obviously, it will come at a cost, but it's better to actually have that expertise at the beginning. So in the long run, you will save money on that. Your supply capacity, when looking at international orders, these are normally bigger than your domestic orders. So you'll need to check, if you have a factory, do you have enough capacity if you need to increase your order? So if you're moving from 1,000 units of whatever product you're doing to 20,000 units, Can you actually do it? Do you have the labor? Do you have the equipment? Will it take you a lot longer to produce it? And do you have the money to invest in that equipment if you need to? International market intelligence. That's where, organizations like the USA Trade Up comes in, where BEMA comes in, to help you with this sort of information. So it's great that you are attending today. So if you do not already have a relationship with them, you can start a relationship with them and, contact your local country representative to find out more about what's offered from USA Trade Up. And I'm sure Gerrit will be more than happy to help you. Okay, moving on to your product readiness. You really need to look at your success in the local market. Do you have potential buyers, already in the local market? Is there potential to find international buyers? Whatever you're selling, can it be sold in South Africa? Is there a need for your product? So whether it's cosmetics or it's meat products, is there really a market? And that's where you need to start doing research on the importing country and what they want. And it's important to understand this, and that's where BEMA and USAID also come into play here. Because they can help you actually find the buyers that you need. Your product adaptability. The requirements for a lot of products may be different in South Africa. The standards may be different. And as we go through the trade toolkit a little later, the actual document, you will see that there's certain requirements that need to be met for certain products. And you need to understand, what are the requirements in South Africa before you export? Because if you export it to South Africa and we find that it doesn't meet our standards, or you don't have an import permit for it, you will be fined, or you're not going to get more orders from the importer again, because importers don't want to deal with these sort of issues. Your cost structure will definitely change when exporting, because then you have a lot more transport costs. You'll also have to include VAT for customs. In some cases, you may need to pay for excise duties depending on the type of cargo. So as much as we are within the SADC region and, it's duty free, that's normal duty. And beyond that, you've got VAT. So everyone has to pay VAT regardless of what the cargo is or what the commodity is. And in some cases, you may need to pay excise, and that usually is for products like cosmetics. Okay, who are your competitors? For your product, do you have local competitors who are exporting? And you'd obviously have to look at who are the competitors in South Africa as well, because we have our own industries. We are importing from other countries, and we may even get it at lower prices. Maybe it's a different quality. So you really have to look at what exactly is in the South African market. But luckily, with the South African retailers, a lot of their prices, a lot of their product specifications are online. So you just need to look at who are the South African retailers, go onto their websites, and look at the types of products that they're selling that's, comparative to what you are selling, and look at the prices, the ingredients, and so on, and because you will be able to get that information. Your product complexity, this is where you really need to think about whether the product needs to be changed when it comes to South Africa to meet our requirements, whether we'll need training on how to use it, if it's machinery and so on. And there's after sales services. So that's where your product complexity comes in. Now, this is a lot to think about, but it doesn't mean that if you don't meet all these requirements, you can't export. This is just to give you an idea of what to look at before you start exporting, so you can actually know what type of information to look for. Okay, your export registrations and developing relationships with key role players. Obviously, before you start exporting, you have a lot of registrations to do. Your first would be your business registration locally in Botswana. You will also have to register as an exporter, usually with customs or the Department of Trade and Industry. So that would depend on your local requirements. Your certificate of origin. To get that, you'll need to be registered with your Chamber of Commerce. So what they would look at is where your product is manufactured, where you're getting your raw materials from. Because the reason you need your certificate of origin is so that you can actually have your cargo be sent to South Africa duty-free under SADC. Okay, so any cargo sent or exported to within the SADC region has to have a certificate of origin. So all of these you need to register as early as possible, and then you've got your product-specific registration. So if you need to register with the Department of Agriculture, you do it as early as possible, because then you will need your SBS certificate, and you need to have that all in advance. You cannot come get your product ready for exporting and then start looking for these certifications, because there will be delays. Your role players that you need to develop relationships with are obviously your business itself. Within your business, you'll need to develop a relationship with the buyer, find out exactly what they require, how much of cargo they're looking for. Are they looking for a long-term relationship? Is it a once-off order? The next organization is your freight forwarder. Before you start exporting, you really need to do some research on the freight forwarders that are available within your country. Those who are experienced with exporting to South Africa, if they know, what are the issues going across the border, how to reduce those delays, and obviously their cost is very important. Your bank is very, very important to have a relationship with. Firstly, you need to make sure that you have enough money in your bank account, because as we all know that the banks don't loan money to people who don't have money. So you need to make sure that your bank account is in good order, especially your business bank account. Because at some point you are going to have to borrow money from them if your payments are late and so on. You'll need to have a relationship with your buyer's notified party, because they will be the people that you actually may send the goods to. So it could be their freight forwarder and so on. The trade promotion service providers like BEMA are very, very important, because they are the people who can help you find those buyers that you need. Work with the USA Trade Hub, because they can also help you. So it's very important at this stage to start with those relationships, because as Mr. Makore said earlier, they will help you with your certifications. They'll help you wherever they can, obviously with some investment from your side. But these are the role plays that can actually open doors for you. So it's good to get in touch and to find out what they can offer, and give them as much information about your business and what you're looking to export. Okay, the export process. Once you've looked at the market and you started advertising, and given prices out for your products, buyers may come to you and say, please provide a quote. And on the trade toolkit, we do have a quote template that you can use, just to give you an idea of what to include on your quote. Then you need to look at how you select your clearing and forwarding agent, what type of services they offer. Do they offer the transportation as well, or are they just offering your clearing services? Do they have, do they know the processes of customs and so on? Your pro forma invoice. This is information that must be included on your pro forma invoice, and this comes on after your export quote, and where you've already discussed with your buyer exactly what they require and where you're making delivery to. Sorry, please excuse me. Okay, processing the export order. Okay, you need to ensure that the order is according to the stipulated requirements from the buyer. And you need to, while you getting the order ready and producing whatever goods, whether it's t-shirts or you're producing honey or your canned meat products, whatever it may be, you need to make sure that everything is according to what they require, whether it's the number, the quality, quantity, the way the goods are packaged and so on. It has to be according to what they require, because you do not want to come to a later stage where the buyer has taken delivery and they're not happy with the goods. While you're doing this, you'll also have to prepare your shipping documents, and you need to make arrangements with the clearing and forwarding agent on when they pick up the goods for delivery. They need to also have copies of the documents so they can clear the goods. The documentation you generally need are the commercial invoice, your packing list, your transport waybill, so whether it's a bill of lading or just an air waybill, your exchange control forms, and the permit. Now, the permit would come from South Africa. So whoever's importing from you will be required to get a permit from the Department of Agriculture if it's agricultural products. So it's best to make sure that the buyer actually is aware of this, because these permits take up to 30 days to process and they do cost some money. So once you give them your commercial invoice or your pro forma invoice, they can apply for the permit. And receiving payment, this is normally based on presenting the documents to the bank if there's a letter of credit involved, or you may receive payment before you even produce the goods, or it could be once it's delivered to the buyer. And part of the export process is the after-sales service. So once you've actually made delivery of the product, it doesn't end there, because if you want a long-term relationship with the buyer, you will have to make sure that you're checking up on, their deliveries. Are they happy with the product? Is there something you can do better? And so on. The import process in South Africa, we normally would have to, as usual, register our businesses, do our import registration with customs. We would also need a clearing and forwarding agent, pay for customs duties, and look at the HS code based on the customs duty. The customs duties are based on the HS codes of every single commodity has an HS code, and your customs duties are based on that. So whether it's duty free or not, it is based just on the HS code. We will also need our commercial invoices from you, packing list, transport waybill, exchange control forms, permits, and so on. So whatever documents that you have gotten ready for us, we will require it on our side to do the import clearance. We sometimes have shipments stopped for inspection. So if there's a problem with any documentation for customs automatically stops shipments for inspection. You may or may not be fined, but we do not know that in advance. It depends on what customs are looking for. It could be stopped because the Department of Agriculture hasn't issued a permit for the product. And then you may have a fine and they may need to inspect it and so on. So this is where your additional costs come from and a lot of delays. Import permits, as I've said earlier, it's the importer's responsibility to get the import permit. So you sending cargo from Botswana cannot get an import permit in South Africa. If I'm ordering from you, I would need to contact the Department of Agriculture and get that and apply for the import permit. This is a commodity specific requirements. So this is pretty much what we have on the regional cross-border trade toolkit. So all the products that we mentioned earlier, we've looked at each and every single one of them and what the requirements are. So every single product, there is VAT due, but because you're from Botswana, you do not have to pay the extra 10% of the FOB value, but you do need to pay 15% VAT. Your costs include your export cost, which is basically producing the goods, your origin cost for transport, warehousing, whatever else you need, insurance, freight, and duties and taxes. So if you're looking at something like coffee, you will be required to get an import permit, or the buyer needs to get an import permit. And in general, cargo will be inspected by Plant and Quality Control or the Department of Agriculture. Okay. And in the case of coffee, there are import prohibitions. So you cannot have coffee beans that are colored, polished, steamed, and so on. So we have a full list of all the commodities, and we have every single requirement for them. So it's just an easier way for you to figure out, okay, you want to export something, what are the costs involved? Okay, I'm having a problem with moving to the next. Okay, so once you've given a quote to the buyer, you are literally starting the formation of the contract. Please remember that a contract for exports is not like a normal written out contract. It's literally emails by going back and forth between you and the buyer. So you make an offer by offering a price for your goods. You may revoke that offer, meaning take it off the table by saying, okay, you're no longer offering it, or you change your price, or whatever it may be. But once you've made an offer and somebody accepts, you cannot actually take that offer off the table. So if you've offered a jar of honey at 50 rands or $4 per jar, and if I come to you and I say I'm happy with that price, you cannot come to me afterwards and say, no, it's actually $5 or $6 now. So when you are making an offer and you are advertising your price, you need to be very careful about the price that you're advertising and whether it is the correct thing for the correct quantity and so on. So once I come to you and I say I'm happy with the price of $4 per bottle, please can you send me 100 bottles? That's me accepting your offer. If I come back to you and I say to you, I'm not happy with $4, I want to pay $3.50, then that's me rejecting your offer and basically counter offering. So you can say yes or no to the $3.50. It's up to you. Okay, and that's just the start of the contract. And generally, what I would advise anybody who wants to export and you are advertising your prices, make sure you have a period of time for acceptance of the offer. So your offer must have a time limit. So you can say, the price is valid for 7 days or 14 days, or it's valid till the 30th of September. That's up to you, because you need to consider the fact that the prices of your raw materials change. Sometimes the price of labor changes, and things change all the time. So you need to make sure you have the price validity time. Contract obligations, the obligations of the seller. So if you are the seller, you will have to make sure that you deliver the goods. You must hand over any documents related to the goods, and you must transfer the property in the goods, meaning you need to transfer the airway bill to me or the bill of lading, because the bill of lading is literally the title deed to the goods. Conformity of goods. The goods must conform to the quantity, quality, description of the goods that you've quoted. The goods must be fit for its purpose. The goods must possess the same quality as a sample or model. So you cannot send a really good quality sample to me and then send, the actual goods are not as good quality, or it's bad quality goods. If you sent a t-shirt to me, you have to make sure it's the same quality that you've sent as the sample. The goods must be contained or packaged to preserve and protect the goods. So whatever goods it is, you need to make sure that the packaging is appropriate. So if you are Transporting honey in glass bottles, you need to make sure that it's protected so it does not break. Obligations of the buyer is required to pay the price, which includes taking the steps and complying with formalities required under the contract, and the buyer must take delivery of the goods. So if I bought from you, I need to make sure I paid the price and I take delivery of the goods. Okay, so you have contract remedies if things don't go as planned. So as the buyer, I can claim damages if you don't send the right goods, or you send me damaged goods instead, or the quality is not as I requested. I may request substitute goods if the goods don't conform to the contract. I may even require you to repair the product if it's broken or if it's not up to standard. I can also give you additional period of time for you to perform your obligation. So if you haven't delivered on time, I can say, I'll give you an additional week. Or I can say, I'm terminating the contract because I'm not happy with it. The seller's right, which is your rights, you can claim for damages if I haven't made payment on time. Or you can require me to make payment or take delivery or perform any of my other obligations that I'm required to. You can also fix an additional time for me to make payment or take delivery, or you can terminate the contract if I haven't made payment and you've sent the goods to South Africa. You can always say you want to terminate the contract and you find another buyer and so on. The passing of risk, loss of or damage to the goods after risk has passed to the buyer does not discharge him from his obligation to pay the price unless the loss or damage is due to an act or omission of the seller. Your passing of risk is dependent on your Incoterms. So your Incoterms is your international commercial terms. They provide internationally accepted definitions and rules of interpretation for commercial terms used in contracts for sale of goods. We'll go into this in a little detail in the next part of the session. So when selecting your Incoterms, you need to look at how much experience you have with international trade, the risk associated with Incoterm, the cost and financial responsibility, your experience handling the transport operators, supplies, and international shipments. Okay. Some of the examples of Incoterms. So Incoterms are changed every 10 years. So literally the Incoterms are just there for you to say, okay, you're selling goods to me, and I need to know where delivery is made. Now, you won't necessarily deliver to my premises in Durban or my premises in Richards Bay if I have those. You will need to actually stipulate where exactly you're making delivery. And depending on the Incoterms, our responsibilities will change. So if it's exports, it means I'm picking up from your premises. If it's free carrier, it means you are delivering to a clearing and forwarding agent for me or their warehouse in Botswana. If it's delivered at terminal, it means you are delivering at a terminal within South Africa for me, or if it's delivered at place, you're delivering at a place. Now, right up until delivery takes place, you are responsible for the cost, for the risks, and it means you'll need to make sure you have insurance, and you'll need to make sure that all the arrangements are made with the transporter and so on. DDP is where you deliver right through to me, and you do the export and import clearance. So you deliver to my premises, okay? The rules for sea and inland waterway are not necessary because, Botswana is a neighboring country and it's overland transportation. Incoterms 2020, they just reduced the Incoterms, but it's very similar and the requirements are more or less the same. So what we've done with the Trade Toolkit is we've given you a tool to use. So regardless of which Incoterm you're choosing, we have stipulated what your responsibilities are, and we'll go through that a bit later. You've got 4 payment methods that you can use in exports. The one is cash in advance, where your buyer pays in advance when they submit your order. So if I'm paying in advance when I submit my order, it's a low risk for me, but it works very well for the seller because you have your money in advance before you can even, you know, process that order itself. Your letter of credit is where I decide I'm buying from you, and if I'm paying $5,000 on the invoice, I go to my bank and I'm saying I'm buying from a seller in Botswana and I'd like to open a letter of credit. So my bank will contact your bank in Botswana and say, you know, Mary wants to open a letter of credit with the seller Ferret in Botswana. And does the seller actually exist? And do they really have a bank account with you? And then your bank will actually come back to my bank and say yes or no. And they will give the details to my bank. Once we've actually finalized the letter of credit, what my bank will do is that they'll take that $5,000 from me and they'll put it aside in a trust account. So as soon as Carrot has his order for me ready and he submits his document to his bank will check the documents, they'll send it to my bank, and then that's when my bank will make payment. So letters of credit are a bit expensive, but they are worth it in the long run because as a seller, you will get your money as soon as you submit your documents. As long as all those documents are correctly submitted and there's no spelling errors, there's no issues with the documents. The documentary credit is similar to an LC. The only difference is my bank does not say, you know, that they will make the payment. So they will not take the payment from me in advance. They'll just pass on the documents to me and then the payment happens. So there is a lot more risk with documentary credit. An open account is where, you know, I may say, okay, can I pay in 7 days or 30 days from delivery or whatever it may be, and you may agree to it. But this is not normally done with new buyers and sellers. This is done when there is in-house accounts where you've got big companies like Toyota in Japan exporting to Toyota in South Africa, and it's, you know, it's an in-house account really that they are just transferring or whatever it may be. So it does not normally happen with new exporters and importers, and it's not advisable to use. So your next step is basically understanding the processes that needs to be followed for your specific commodity that you want to export. Start with building relationships now. So you have an idea of what the cost are for clearing and folding and transportation and so on. Attend the relevant meetings, webinars, trade shows, that whatever you can attend that's relevant to you. Keep in touch with the USA Trade Hub, keep in touch with BEMA and any other organizations that's going to help you. Focus on your core business. So if it's making t-shirts or PPE, or if it's producing honey, whatever it is, make sure you're focusing on the quality of your product and that it's meeting the required standards. And delegate work that can be done by others. So if it's the clearing and folding, delegate that. If you're looking for a storage space, delegate that to a warehousing company or logistics company. And invest time and money in building your export business. So that's it for this session. I'm going to stop sharing and hand over back to Mantha.
Thank you so much, Mary. What a very insightful, very informative presentation that you've just made there. I think this is exactly what we need in Botswana, the kind of information that we can actually use to actually be in a position to export. I know many times we get such questions, but actually, how do I export to America or to South Africa? And I think most of the questions that we always get, you have covered them beautifully, and we are hoping that our participants have their questions ready for you so that where they did not get clarity, they can get it. So I think now if we have any questions, our participants, please do raise your hand. There is a hand next to the chat box. there that you can raise so that we can allow you to ask your question. So if we have any question, please do. We have 2 hands. I think the first one that came was George's hand. So William, let's give George the opportunity first. Please, George, come through with your question. Thank you. George, you may ask your question. George, please go ahead and ask your question. Unmute yourself and put yourself on video.
Chair, I don't know whether it's this George or another George. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, George, but the other George we see, but we don't hear.
Okay, so it's not me. Thank you.
We can hear you. Yeah. Okay. May we allow the other George to prepare his question while we give William the opportunity to ask? George, you will come after William.
Thank you, Madam. My question goes to the presenter in terms of the payment options. I want to find out.
William, please go ahead and ask the question. Unmute yourself.
I did unmute myself. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, William. Please go ahead. Yes.
Yes. My
definitely.
question goes
Go
to
ahead.
the presenter on the last session on payment options. Where does she see factoring coming in, if she has an idea about factoring for exports?
Factoring usually comes in with commodities, and obviously it's about getting those prices. And to me, it's a lot like gambling because you're literally trying to figure out what the price is going to be in future. But I'd like to say that I'd rather not discuss it here because this is for straightforward exporters. So factoring doesn't come in, in this sort of sense where people are just starting to export. This factoring is at a totally different level with commodities itself. So you need to understand the commodity prices. You need to understand how it's affected by different things that happen in the world, whether it's the price of oil or whatever it may be. So factoring is a lot more complicated and so if you're looking at factoring, it's like I said, it's a different level, and we're trying to be as straightforward as possible for the new exporters. Factoring is great if you understand it and you understand how to use it, and how to use it to your advantage. But it's literally being able to price your product at the right price at the right time and not lose out really. So if you have a product like maize and you understand, okay, in 6 months' time or in a few months' time, the price of maize is going to go up because, there's been a drought, really. That's where it comes into play. But here we're looking at, basic exporting, really. I'm not sure if that covers what you're looking for.
Not exactly. I was looking at export as receivables finance. For example, if Sankoloba exports honey to Germany, whilst she is waiting for payment, she gets payment like invoice discounting. And that has got nothing to do with world markets because the prices would have been done in the formation of the contract, like you outlined in the process. And once the buyer has accepted the goods can be financed. So instead of using an LC or a bank guarantee, you could use factoring. It was in that sense that I was asking.
Oh, okay. You could use it, but it depends on what price you're getting, because obviously you may lose out in the long run with the actual price if you cannot wait, because factoring is a good option if you don't have, if you don't have access to straightforward bank loans and so on.
Correct. Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you, William. Thank you, Mary. If we have another question, we do have a hand up here. And also please note that the presentation will be shared on the Study Hub website. We have a hand from Kione. Please do ask your question, switch on your mic and your video. Kione, you may proceed and ask your question. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Thank you. My first time to attend this kind of meeting, and it was very insightful. I've learned a lot, and I have questions. And one of my questions is that if you have a product, if you have, let me say, some of the indigenous plants that we've been using growing up, with our grandparents, and it works. It's a, for example, let me say it's a skincare product. It works, but no scientific study was done on it. But you know that this thing works and you've used it for years. How do you go about it to make sure that it can get into the market, even selling it outside the country? And then the other question that I wanted to ask is about, so if I sell to, let me say, if I export my products, do I sell to individual customers or I sell to a particular shop, let me say in SA? Who really do I sell to?
I think firstly, you'd start off with looking at how you can actually produce that product in a manner that's marketable. So if it is a herb that you can get some sort of oil out of or something like that, you'd need to bottle it and then start selling it locally. And if it works, because there's a lot of natural products that's on the market, and obviously there is no scientific backing for it. I mean, if somebody tells you, okay, cook with coconut oil, there's very little scientific backing sometimes. And also, the same coconut oil you can use on your hair, you can use on your skin. But no one can actually, check scientifically, and no one has really of these products if they really, really work, because it may work with some people and may not work with others. But my point is, find a way to actually, manufacture in a, marketable way. So if you're bottling it as essential oils, do it that way, or you could put it as part of a cream. So look at it that way, and then start with the domestic market first. If it does well and you can sell it domestically and you can sell it to the supermarkets domestically, because that's where your learning will come from on how to pack it, how to market it, and so on. Then you move to the next level of exporting, because there's no point in spending all that money looking at exporting and there might not be a market for it. So the best thing to do is work on the market locally. Once you've gotten to a certain level with that and you've got good business and so on, then you start marketing internationally, because your local domestic market is like your test market. So, and it's a bit hard with natural products to market, because as much as there's a lot of interest in it, there's very little understanding about it. So you will have to do as much research and find a way to market it in a proper way and give out as much information about it and so on. And you may find that by giving all that information out, you might get competitors. But, that's part of what you need to do, because if I want to buy a natural product, I want to find out as much as possible about it, because obviously you're not coming from Procter and Gamble or Unilever or one of these companies and selling me a product. You're an unknown brand, really. So that's where all the information comes. But basically, just work on your domestic market first.
Oh, okay. Thank you so much. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much, Mary, for the answers and great questions indeed, very practical questions. I hope you are satisfied with the answers.
Yes, thank you, Maxi.
And also, you are welcome. And I think it's also exciting to note that Botswana is actually exporting. We do have companies that are actually exporting to the American market. And it's very important to network with such companies so that we can also they can share their experiences, how they have made it possible. Because sometimes when you just hear about this or read about it, it sounds very difficult or even close to impossible until you meet the other companies, of course, other in the industry who have actually penetrated such markets. It may not be so easy, but it's actually doable. It's something that can be done or is being done. George, I think your hand is up. Please, go through with your question. You may ask your question.
Yes. Good evening, people. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes, I hear you, Josh. Please go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. I'm interested in sending some products, some food stuff from Botswana to the US. So I wanted to find out if there's any restrictions or permits that may be required to export Mopani worms and Morohoya dinawa to the US market. Is there any special permit that is required for that? That's all.
George, to be honest, we're not covering the USA market on this, and that has been covered before. So I suggest what you do is that you contact Gerrit directly and email him, and he'll be able to provide you details on the USA market. Because I know they have done work on the AGOA agreement with USA Trade Hub as well. So please contact Gerrit and he'll be able to give you more details on that. Because similar to the toolkit that I've done for cargo coming to South Africa, there was a toolkit that was done by the USA Trade Hub on AGOA. So I'm sure Gerrit will be able to assist you with that.
Okay. Answered, yeah.
Thank you for the question. I think we'll take the last question and then we go ahead to the next presentation. We do have Homozo. Please do ask your question.
Oh, I've Lloyd now.
Okay. Thank you, guys. What I wanted to ask, it was about, is there any, do you need to have
please switch off your mic, sir. Homozo, you may ask your question.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, guys. What I wanted to understand is it mandatory to have a certification or accreditation from a regulating institution like maybe SABS or BOBS for you to take part in this export-import business?
You don't necessarily need SABS or BOTS approval. It depends on the type of commodity itself and who you're selling it to. Because some supermarkets in South Africa may require SABS approval or any other approval regulatory organization approval, but it does depend on the commodity. So if you are exporting normal agricultural commodities, that's not normally necessary. But SABS approval does give you a bigger market because it's very hard to get it and it's quite costly from what I understand. But it really depends on what you plan on exporting. So it depends on who you want to sell to and their requirements, because some stores may accept it without SABS approval and others may not.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mary. I think we may proceed to your next presentation. While we engage via the chats, please let's utilize the chats to, if you have any more questions, you will get answers. And also note the presentations will be shared as well.
Thank you, Mantha. Okay, I'm just switching off my video and I'll share my screen. Okay, so this is the Regional Cross-Border Trade Toolkit that we've developed. So this is the actual document that you may have received. If not, it will be sent to you after the webinar. Okay, so I'm just going to go through so you have an idea of where to find the information and what sort of information that is on the toolkit itself. We've got our target countries and a brief explanation of what was covered. And then we go on to the export processes in a lot more detail than what we've covered in the presentation itself. We look at the import processes in South Africa, and here we also cover a lot of information on customs itself and their processes. The documentation that's required, Incoterms and contracts, and your finance as well, and payment. And at the end of the document, you've got fact sheets on honey, processed meat products, plant and plant products, and a list of cleared plant products and countries from March 2020. The fact sheet on dried beans and FAQs, frequently asked questions that we've had during our sessions with some of the countries and from the actual surveys that were completed. The annexure, the first annexure is the Incoterms, where we've gone through the Incoterms for 2010 and 2020, and I'll show you how to use that, as well as the commodity special requirements. Okay. So this is just a brief understanding on the countries that were covered and why. And your export processes, we start with the export readiness and more detailed on what we've already discussed on this presentation. But if you want more information, just read through the document. So, you know, the export registrations that you may need, export quote, your pro forma invoice. This is a sort of template that you could use for a pro forma invoice if you need to, just to see what information that is required. So I'm just going to zoom into it so you have a better idea of what it looks like and the information. So on a pro forma invoice, you'll have your details, which is the exporter, the consignee, and the purchasing consignee, your forwarding agent or notified party, the mode of transport, payment terms, carrier, port of load, port of discharge, packages, shipment weight, and then you've got your order numbers, the items, HS numbers, export control numbers, license types where required, country of origin, your quantities, and your unit selling price and your value in USD where required. Okay, and then at the bottom you've got certifications that are required, and special instructions. Okay, on the top right hand side you've got your shipment details that you would get from your airway bills and so on, and then you've got your Incoterms there. Okay. So processing the export order, it's just a lot more detail that we've covered here. You're receiving payments, the processing your documents, and so on. The import processes, we've covered a lot of information from customs and what their requirements are. So it's very important to actually read it and understand what's in it. And, you know, there are a lot of prohibited goods, and make sure you're not shipping those because they will be fined, they will be confiscated, and you may have criminal charges. Okay, so the amount of and type of duty imposed on a product is determined by the following main criteria: the value of the goods, the customs value, the volume or quantity of the goods, and the tariff classification, which is the HS code. Okay, VAT is applicable to all shipments. Okay, we look at determining the customs value, what happens to cargo when it enters South Africa, and the state warehouses. So if your goods are stopped by customs, they go straight into the state warehouse. And at some point, if it's unclaimed goods and your buyer has decided to abandon it, those goods will be auctioned off. Usually it takes a couple of years to get to that point. So until then, the buyer can still claim the goods and pay for it. But obviously that would include the state warehouse storage charges and so on. Your documentation, we give a full explanation of what's required on all the documentation from your pro forma invoice, commercial invoice. We've got examples of the commercial invoice. We've also got examples of the packing lists. So your commercial invoice is pretty much the same information as your pro forma invoice. Your packing list, it just doesn't have the prices on it, but it has all the details that you would need for your buyer to know how things are packed, the length, width, height, cubic measurement of all the goods and so on, and what's packed in each carton or each container. Okay, so we just give you an understanding of what the packing list has to contain. Transport documents. So you have different transport documents depending on the mode of transport. You usually have an airway bill or a bill of lading. Clearing and forwarding agent or logistics company can most likely give you a house bill of lading, which is an in-house bill for them, and that can actually be used for your clearing. Then you'll need your certificate of origin. Okay. And your phytosanitary certificates. So this you will need to get from the Department of Agriculture. So this is why you need to make sure you're registered with the Department of Agriculture. You need to know what the process is to get your phytosanitary certificates, and whether they need to inspect and so on. Okay, your Incoterms and contracts, there's a much better explanation of it here. So whether it's your obligations and all of that, it's on this document as well. And where your risk passes. Okay, finance and payments as well. You've got a full explanation on all the different finance and payment methods. Okay, this is the fact sheet on honey. And you'll see that in South Africa, we have two grades, which is choice grade and industrial grade. What we've done with the fact sheet on honey, we've even given you the marking requirements. So when it is packaged, there are specific marking requirements for honey. So the name of the product in letters at least 4 millimeters high. Okay, the origin in letters of at least 4 millimeters high. The grade of the content at least 2 millimeters high. And here's an example of what it should contain. And any honey that comes into the country has to be irradiated. So all of this information has to be on the labels that's exported to South Africa. Okay, your meat and meat products. Okay, so it's basically any products that's derived from animals. To export, your importer must have an import permit or a vet import permit. You will actually have to deal with the state vet on your side to get your vet certificates. Okay, so this is a little more information on importation of animal products. Sometimes people import for their own use, and there are limits to that. Okay, we've got a fact sheet on plant and plant products. So you'll have to deal with your Department of Agriculture on your side. And we on our side will deal with our Department of Land Reform and Rural Development, which was previously the Department of Agriculture. And we will get our permits, and you will need to make sure that you've got your phytosanitary certificates where required. Okay, so it takes about 30 days to get these import permits for both vet and for the agriculture side, right? This is just a list of cleared plant products. Okay, we have a fact sheet on dried beans as well. As you can see, there are very, very specific requirements for canning grades and the different grades of dried beans and what's acceptable and what's not. Okay, your FAQs. Okay, so things like who's responsible for the import permits, that's the buyer's responsibility here. What permits are required for exports to South Africa? That's on the commodity requirements list. How you choose the Incoterm for the contract of sale, that will be on the Incoterms tool that we've done. Okay, so this is the Incoterms tool. And here what we've done is we've taken all the Incoterms for 2010 and 2020. Okay, so depending on the year, and if you want to use X works because you're the seller and you don't want any responsibilities, it's your first time selling, and you want me, the buyer, to come and pick up the goods from your factory, I can get a clearing and forwarding agent or a transporter to do that for me. When you are selling the goods, then you'll say it's X works, and the place of delivery will be your address, right? So it will be X Works, Gaborone, Botswana, with a specific address and Incoterms 2010. So the actual place of delivery, you'll know, is your premises. The cost that you incur will be all the costs up until the goods are at my disposal as a buyer. So when I come to your warehouse, so if my transporter comes, that good must be placed where it can be picked up easily. So all the cost up until then with getting the documents and so on, it's for you, and checking the quality, measuring, weighing, counting, whatever is necessary for packaging, that's your costs, right? So that's the minimum requirements for a seller to basically get the goods ready and make sure it's packaged properly. You'll also need to provide your export certificates, commercial invoice, and packing list. And the risk passes at place of delivery at agreed time. So from the time I pick up from you, I will need insurance. Okay, so this is how you can actually just go through all the Incoterms and look at what works for you and what doesn't, because you need to actually see the type of risk that you want to take. So with free carrier, you, in a similar way, whatever documents you're using, whether it's a letter of credit or your commercial invoice, it will be FCA, the actual place of delivery, Incoterms 2010. You have to write it out fully. Okay, so the delivery that you'll do will be to the carrier or person nominated by me, the buyer, at the agreed point. If I tell you, please deliver it to a warehouse in Gaborone, and this is the company I'm using, that's what you need to do. You need to deliver it there. So your risk is right up until it is delivered to that point and on that day. Okay, so if I tell you by Friday I want it delivered there, you need to make sure it's delivered to that place. Okay, so the seller is responsible. You are responsible for all the costs up until delivery. So even the transport to the delivery place, you are responsible for that. Any cost after the delivery is for me. Any risk is for me. So I will make sure that I'm paying for the insurance from the time it's delivered. I'm paying for the transport, export clearance, import clearance, and so on. But you will still make sure that you'll provide all the documents for the shipment, the commercial invoice, packing list, any certificates, and the risk passes at place of delivery and agreed time. Now, the reason why companies use Incoterms is because it makes it a lot easier than, you know, us sitting and discussing, oh, where will the delivery be? When do you need to pay your insurance from? When will I pay the insurance from? Who's responsible for, arranging the transport from your premises to the warehouse? Who's responsible for arranging the transport from the warehouse to the border? And who's responsible for the transport from the border, and so on? So instead of us going back and forth and, in between making mistakes and missing out things, we use Incoterms, because Incoterms just says, okay, if it's free carrier in Gaborone, I know this is where my risk passes and this is where I need to pay from. And that's up until where you need to pay toll. Okay, so up until it gets delivered, you have to pay for all the costs. You have to make sure the documents are ready. And you have to make sure you are insured up until then. Because if anything happens to that cargo in that time, it's your responsibility. From the moment it's delivered, and if it gets damaged, let's just say the truck has an accident after you deliver it, from the time it's going from the warehouse to the border, it's my problem. I need to make sure that I have insurance for that. So that is where Incoterms come into play. So it's good to understand it, and we've tried to make it as easy as possible for you to use. So you don't have to, sit and think about what your responsibilities are. You know that if you choose CPT, this is what you're responsible for. So here's the rest of the Incoterms, and we've gone through every single one. And Incoterms 2020, which is very recent and not used as much, but if somebody wants to use Incoterms 2020, it's, you have access to it and you'll understand, what you need to do as a seller. So the next annex here is the commodity special requirements. So we've got honey here, we've got cashew nuts, and all the requirements of it. So if you've got meat and meat products, you will be paying the 15% VAT. These are the types of costs you'll be looking at: your duties and taxes, freight, origin charges, insurance, exports. So depending on what your Incoterm is, the cost may change. An import permit is required, and the controlling authority is the Director of Animal Health. Okay, so I, as an importer, I will need to get that import permit, and all meat that comes into South Africa is normally inspected. Okay, so there are additional charges, and it's very important to understand that as a buyer, I may need to be aware of it. And if you are using an Incoterm like DDP, where you deliver it to me and you're doing all the clearing, then you need to be aware that the inspection might happen and that there will be extra costs for it. So you need to think about adding those into your pro forma invoice and so on. Okay, so a lot of the process stuff like sauces, you don't necessarily need an import permit. So from what I've understood, that if it is sauces and it's heat treated, then you will not need an import permit. Okay, but an inspection is required. Okay, so depending on what your commodity is, there will be different permits that's required, different expectations, and different departments that you will need to deal with. So all of that is on the commodity special requirements. So if you look at cosmetics, right, you don't need to pay customs duty, but you will need to pay VAT, right? And you will also have to pay excise. Okay, so excise duty is for luxury goods and other goods that's not necessities. So cosmetics are luxury goods, so you will have to pay 7% of your FOB value. So keep that in mind when you are exporting cosmetics, because you have those additional costs. Okay, so that's it from the toolkit. Manta, are there any more questions?
Yeah. Wow, beautiful. Very, very insightful once again. You have just given us exactly what we need. This is really the kind of information that our exporters really want to familiarize themselves with or acquaint themselves with. So thank you so much, Mary, for that. I think because we are slightly behind time, we are slightly behind time. We are going to take only 1 or 2 questions if we do have any, but we still have a chat box that we can throw our questions there and they will be answered. And also note that the presentation will be shared via the SatiHub website. So please do reach out to it, go through it, and get more insight from the presentation. So if we have any questions, please let's get 1 or 2 questions. If we do not have any questions, then we will proceed to the next presentation by Francis Fraser. So I don't know if we have any questions from the floor. I can't see, there is no hands from the floor. Once again, thank you so much, Mary, for this very insightful and informative. Oh, okay, we do have a question here from Mama Soy. Please do ask your question. The floor is yours. And switch on your mic as well as your video. It would be nice to see your face. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm very thankful to be invited into this meeting. I joined you guys a little bit late, like I have got like 10 minutes right now, but mine is not actually a question. It's just to say, since I heard that there will be an information that is going to be shared in the website, I think I'll catch up on the topic that Mary has been presenting. So I was just putting you guys in update that I just joined you, but it's not a problem. I'll catch up. I'll read the info, the presentation on the website. So thank you very much. Let's continue with the presentation.
Okay, thank you for joining us. And for those who have submitted questions on your pre-registration, we will be sending out the answers after the webinar. I will go through them and try and answer as many as possible. So if we haven't covered or haven't answered something that you have asked, we will try and answer it afterwards.
Thank you, Mama Soe, for the question. We do have one question, however, from the chat box from Nelba Hude. She's asking about, it says that table 1 is stating a list of fresh produce and cleared countries. What does cleared countries mean?
That's where you don't require import permits. So there are some goods that have already been cleared. So our Department of Agriculture is usually on top of all the information, coming from the different countries and so on. So they do have a number of goods that you don't need to get import certificates for. So if it is applicable to Botswana, then you don't have to worry. But it's always best to get the buyer to check with the Department of Agriculture, because that list was from March 2020. And things change quite often. So I would advise them to just double check before, exporting.
Okay, thank you, Mary. I hope your question is answered now. Mama, so please switch off your video. Thank you. And the microphone as well. Thank you. I think going forward.
Okay. Francis has submitted another question.
There's another question. Okay. Okay, let's accompany. Oh, you want to answer it in the interest of time, if you have access?
I can do it quickly. I think that what is important to understand is that even if you do not have normal customs duties to be paid, you will be required to pay VAT, and that's why we've added it on the commodity specific requirements. So you know in advance that you can calculate it based on the calculations that we provided and know in advance that you need to pay. So without a doubt, you need to pay that 15% VAT. And that is why there will be those costs even at the last minute. So whether or not you are aware of it, it is applicable. So that is why this is one of the reasons why we created the toolkit, is so that you understand in advance. Yes, you don't have to pay normal customs duties, but you will have to pay VAT, and you may also have to pay excise depending on what the cargo is. So, we've tried to put in as much of the information as possible, based on the commodities, based on the requirements. So when you start exporting, you are aware. And this is why I say the financial part is so important. You need to know you need money in advance. You need to have a good relationship with your bank. Yes, there are options like factoring available, but that's not as easy to get. So the best thing to do is have as much money as possible available and time to actually, if you have to wait for payments, you need to have money in that space. Okay, Francis, you have your hand up.
Sorry. Hi, everyone. I wanted to just add to your response, Mary, from an experience that we had supporting an exporter from Malawi. And the stock got stuck on the border for days because of this issue. So I got my hands dirty on this. And one of the things I would recommend, and I think Mary said it earlier, is if you develop a good relationship with a clearing agent or a freight forwarding company, you can actually build up a relationship where they would make the payment for you, so that you don't have to try and get the correct reference number for SARS and make the payment, send the proof. So it's very important to develop that relationship with a company that can actually advance that payment and then invoice you for it afterwards. It might not happen the first time you export, but eventually that's a relationship that you can build up with a freight forwarding company or a clearing agent. Thanks, Mary. Thanks, Mantla.
Thanks, Francis. I fully agree. And that's why I say the relationships are very, very important with all stakeholders. Develop long-term relationships and make sure they know what they're doing. Question, if they're willing to answer, then keep going with the relationship. If they're not willing to give you information, then just be a bit careful, because you need to deal with people who are open book with information as well. So whether it's a clearing and forwarding agent, whoever it is, they must be able to tell you in advance what your costs will be. So they will also be able to know, okay, so you need to pay your 15% VAT and 7% of its cosmetics and so on, if they have that experience. But you have to start talking to them as early as possible so you know what the costs are.
Thank you, Mary, and thank you, Francis, for the question. We do not have any questions appearing from our chat box. We don't have any hand up. I think what I can say is that if we do remember or have any comment, please don't hesitate to contact or get in touch with the US Sati Hub country rep, Mr. Kharit. I think his contacts are also shared in the chat box, as well as the presentation at the end. They should be something in the website when you reach out for the presentation. So I think without any further ado, we will have back Fraser Francis to give us the closing remarks. I think we can share her bio so that we can familiarize ourselves with her greatness. Of course, she has more than 19 years of work experience in international development, focusing on market-based solutions to inclusive growth and development. During her career, she has managed projects with various international donors. She is the portfolio manager for Botswana, Namibia, and Malawi, focused on enhancing trade with South Africa. I think we have interacted quite a number of times, and very helpful to us, the Botswana side. We can testify to that. let's have you on the platform. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mantla, for the warm welcome. It's been a pleasure participating this afternoon and listening to both you and to Mary. I'd first of all like to say a very big thank you to the Botswana Exporters Manufacturers Association for co-hosting this event with us. We are really focusing on supporting our local partners like Burma to take these tools. We should in fact not even be hosting all of these things on our website. We should be hosting them on the Burma website going forward. So that's something we can take up. But thank you, Mantla, for agreeing to partner with us and to moderate today. It was lovely having somebody new on stage, or not new, but somebody different to the usual USAID Trade Hub suspects. Mary, thank you for sharing all of your pearls of wisdom with us. There were some tough questions. We had a lot of questions from the 78 people who registered for this event. So we will definitely provide feedback on those, as Mary mentioned. Some of them relate to the content of this webinar, but some of them relate to other subjects. I would say if you're in a hurry for some information, please do reach out to Gerrit, as Mary and Mantla mentioned, because he's on the ground and he can give quick advice on suggestions on reliable transport companies and so on, which is one of the questions we didn't get to this afternoon. As shared in the chat box, you can see both this webinar presentation and video on our website. There are also several others, I think about 30 different webinars that we've hosted over the last 18 months or so that cover different topics that might also be of interest to you if you're wanting to expand into South Africa or the US. So if you're having a bit of spare time to educate yourself, you'll find a wealth of information there. You can also find the toolkit on the website that Mary showed us, and please feel free to download that and use it as much as possible. We have quite a few upcoming events in the next few weeks. We are doing a similar workshop to this in Mozambique on the 14th of September. In fact, we have one in Namibia tomorrow as well. So this is something we're wanting to do at a country level so that we can connect more with exporters and understand your questions and needs more. So there's another session like this in Mozambique on the 14th. On the 15th, we have a very exciting, more trade-focused event. It's around ingredients, food and cosmetics ingredients. This is really for companies that have already got an FDA, Food and Drug Administration registration, as well as some sort of a certification, whether it's an organic certification or a food safety certification. So the entry requirements for this one are a bit more tough in terms of getting support to link up with some US buyers. Then we also have a cosmetics sector session, also focused on the US market. This will be in collaboration with the South African Consulate in New York. And we will hear from US buyers in the cosmetics sector about what's happening in the market and even potentially meet some buyers in that session. And then again, another trade toolkit webinar in Zambia on the 16th. So it's not exclusive to those countries. If you want to sneak into one of these, if you feel like you missed out and the recording is not enough, you can also reach out to Gerrit and see if you can jump onto one of the other sessions. Then we have country reps like Gerrit in all of the countries that we are represented in. So those are the contact details. And maybe Gerrit, if I can just ask you just to go back to that in case anyone missed Gerrit's contact details. For Botswana, Gerrit Struff, you can reach him on his email. And if you've got any questions for follow-up, please do reach out to him. With that, a very big thank you to everyone for being here. I also, just to quickly mention, I saw Yemi shared the Natural Products Association of Botswana details in the chat. If there are queries on Mupani worms, cosmetics ingredients like natural oils, those came up in the discussion, please reach out to Yemi on the email that he provided. I think all of the business membership organizations that are active in Botswana are a very useful wealth of information and experience. So please reach out to them as well, in addition to Gerrit. With that, thank you very much again, Mantla and Mary, and to the team on the ground in Botswana from the USA Trade Hub. Well done on a great turnout in Botswana today, and enjoy the rest of your afternoon and evening. Until next time.